Hi, I'm Sanjay Patel. I'm a pediatrician. I look after children with infections and immune problems, and I'm based at Southampton Children's Hospital.
Hi Sanjay. Can you describe a little bit about what your job involves?
Yeah, when children are very poorly with infections, they sometimes end up being transferred to our children's hospital in Southampton. And then I get asked to think about what sort of infections they have, what sort of treatments they need, what sort of tests they need. And I then follow up those children and families to see how they get better. And I also look after children who've got problems with their immune systems, which are the fighting bits of your body that stop you getting poorly. And I look after them as well.
How's your job been affected by the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, my job's been pretty busy because I look after infections. You can imagine when you've got a worldwide pandemic going on, people like me are asked lots of questions about how you run the hospital, which children can be seen where, how schools work, all sorts. I've been really busy, is the honest truth.
What are the biggest issues then for children?
Well, the good thing is that we found out, and this is all pretty new, we didn't really know about coronavirus till about December of last year. The really good thing for children is that children don't get particularly sick with this. So, I'm used to looking after really poorly children, and actually, there haven't been many poorly children at all in the country. So, that's really good. The other bits that are good is it doesn't seem as if children transmit coronavirus quite as readily as adults, especially young children, and they're probably less likely to get infected with coronavirus compared to adults. I think the real impact on children has been that we've had to change the way we do everything in society, not just in the hospital, but also in schools and in shops and bars. And I think all of that has had a huge impact on children. Not having schools open has just been really tough for children, not just from an education perspective, but just seeing their friends. Same as lockdown. And I think from a medical perspective, although children haven't got sick with coronavirus, their parents have been a bit scared to take them to see doctors. And I think that's had a bit of an impact as well. So, yeah, it's been an odd effect on children and young people, actually, not necessarily directly due to coronavirus.
What are your main concerns about the coronavirus pandemic as a doctor specialising working with young children?
Well, I'm really worried about, firstly, us going into lockdown again. I don't think we are, as a country, going to go into lockdown. And for the reasons of, all the other impact on society and schools, that's hugely damaging for families and for children and young people. I'm obviously worried about a second surge. We've already seen that cases have started going up across Europe, in England, and I think that's why we brought in a little bit more robustness in terms of social distancing, the rule of six. I think those sorts of things are really important because if the virus gets out of control again, we will have to take more drastic measures to stop it spreading. Because if it spreads and if it gets into the frail and elderly and into adults, then they'll end up getting poorly and coming into hospital. And the real worry is that we'll run out of enough beds for adults, especially very sick adults. So we all have a massive responsibility to try and avoid that happening.
Mhm. What can you say to reassure children and young people and parents?
Well, I think reassuringly, children are not getting that poorly. Um, Reassuringly, schools have reopened. The bits that are a bit harder, and I know parents and children have really struggled with, even in the 2 weeks that schools have been open, is that we're still not entirely sure which children need to be sent home and which children can come into school. And obviously, children with just a runny nose, absolutely fine to come into school. But as soon as you start having a fever or you lose a taste of sense of smell or taste, then it's really important to get tested for coronavirus. Um, the problem we've obviously had in the past few weeks is the testing has been quite challenging, and suddenly now that we've really pushed the system, stressed out the testing system, we realise that we don't have enough testing capacity at the moment, and that will get better. But I think that we just have to work things out as we go along a bit at the moment.
There are some misconceptions about who is actually infectious and whether or not people who are asymptomatic, those people that don't show symptoms, whether or not they are spreading the virus or not spreading. Can you clarify that up at all for us?
Yeah, I can. I can try. It's quite complicated, is the honest truth. I think obviously if someone's got a fever and cough, then we tell them to isolate, and they get tested, and if they're positive, they isolate for 10 days, and if they're negative, they can once they're feeling better, they can come into school or the workplace or whatever. There are definitely a large proportion of people who have coronavirus who are asymptomatic. That's for sure. And that we've learned during the pandemic. We didn't know that right at the start. We assumed that everyone who had coronavirus would eventually get symptoms. But we think that maybe up to about 40% of people, maybe higher, are totally asymptomatic. I think the bit that we're much less clear, and it's a lot grayer, is how much of a risk are they to other people. And I think that they're highly likely to be a risk, but they're highly likely to be a much lower risk, or considerably lower risk, than people who are coughing and spluttering everywhere, because that's how the virus transmits. It transmits via droplets. And so if you're coughing, you're likely to be, spreading the virus more effectively. But that said, even people who don't appear to have any symptoms have been shown to be able to transmit the virus. So that's what makes this virus quite challenging, actually.
And how can young people and their families, what can they do to protect themselves and help their communities?
I think they have a really important role in protecting society and their community. So we're all in this together. And I think it's really unhelpful when we start pointing fingers at different groups of people. That's not how we're going to get through the next sort of 6 months. And it's going to be a challenge the next 6 months. I think the data at the moment, and I think it's important to look at that data, because only with that can we work out what we need to target, has shown that the increase in prevalence in the past few weeks has been more in young adults than it has in other age groups. And that shows us that if we do not maintain social distancing and things like that, there is a risk of transmission. But I think that young people have a really important role in society and sort of spreading good societal messages. They did an amazing job with the environment, and in terms of the environmental message that really came to the front prior to coronavirus. And we can do the same now, but really push, challenge their friends, their parents, their teachers, if they see them not social distancing, if they see them not wearing masks where they should be, if they see them not conducting proper hand hygiene. I think, we've all got to work together, and only if we do that are we going to get through the next few months.
Definitely agree. Well, thank you very much for giving up your valuable time. Wish you all the very best. And yes, let's hope this is all over very soon. Thank you.
Pleasure.